Welcome to the P.A.T podcast. As always, I am Patrick, and today I have with me a good friend. I like to call a friend after having some conversations, following his work, following all the things that he's doing, and just constantly. And when I say constantly, I'm not undermining when I say that he is constantly laying gravy, even when he doesn't realize it. The one and only Tophur Christopher Gardner. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you again.
You too, man. And so let's just dive right in. We'll go over all this stuff today. But the reason why I reached out to you is with your background. For those who haven't seen the prior episodes with Tophur, he's an architect, or he's an engineer. He's architect. He's doing everything you can think of, but he's using sacred geometry. He's using what nature is already basically showing us. And one of the cool things that I've started doing with my side in my field with the physical fitness and personal training is seeing how does that correlate to the body. And so I reached out to Tophur wanting to get more insights, pick his brain a little bit more. And I guess he was already kind of thinking about some of these things. So to say it was a sink is putting it lightly. So, but yeah, man, anything?
Yeah, I had been nerding hard on the phi ratio and the golden ratio. I'm doing a design and an epic design for a new project, and I baked into the design, the golden ratio into the layout of the buildings and the size of the windows relative to the doors and proportions. And I've been geeking out on Kenneth Wheeler's work, and he was talking about the phi ratio between the oxygen and the hydrogen atoms within the water molecule. And so when you said you were going that direction, I was like, oh my God, we have to geek hard on this, because
I love it, man. So let's pull it back a little bit. For those who don't know what phi is, the golden ratio, let's maybe just start there if you don't mind just kind of explaining what it is, kind of the origin.
Well, the phi ratio is sort of God's, fingerprint on all biological life. And by biological life, meaning things that have a soul, things that have water, have the water molecule in them. Most people, when they think of water, they think of H2O. That's what we're taught. But now we're finding out that water is much closer to H3O4. And water is one of the most unique substances that there is, because it has all these geometric ratios that change within it depending on temperature. But at its resting state, if you're just to look at the H2O molecule, you end up having essentially a very specific shape of a triangle in it, in relation to the big oxygen molecule and the small hydrogen molecules. And that ratio, there's a phi ratio in that. And what the old Pythagoreans, who knows how many ancient civilizations knew this, but they had encoded in their art the phi ratio, which is 1 to 1.618. And pretty much they've done all these blind studies with even humans now with what do people find attractive? When you're actually looking at something. A few years ago, Aston Martin made the most beautiful car I'd ever seen. And I'd come to find out that the lead engineer, he had baked into all the proportions, the phi ratio. The car was just absolutely stunning. Any angle you looked at it was just like, oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just something within us living beings, that if we have water in us, we kind of will resonate with other things that have water in them. And if that water is in a highly coherent state, it ends up being beautiful. What we end up, we won't know why we find it beautiful, but we will find it beautiful. And you're getting into personal training. Me as a massage therapist, you can definitely tell the coherence in people, whether the coherence is at a high level or it's at a low level. Another way of saying that is, do they have a lot of phi ratio working in them, or do they have a lower amount of that phi ratio working within them.
Absolutely, man. And what's cool, just kind of with the segue into the body, is when you look at how they were back in the day, supposedly, allegedly, they were doing their, a hand in a forearm is how they were measuring certain things, and knowing that this right here, from top of the fingers to the wrist and from the wrist to the elbow, is the phi ratio right here on your body. And that's what's really, that was really starting to catch my interest, was going, wait, so to your point, like if this is on our body, and knowing the relationship with water, and what we thought we knew about water is not that at all, it's then going, wow, where else in my body does this correlate? Where is this found? And then taking it a step further, at least for me, was going, to your point, if this is out of alignment, therefore do we start to experience disease, an inability to connect with our body, be present with self, feeling confidence, these emotions that come with it, right? Because as we know, Dr. Yumoto, you can talk to water after, it's really the salts, but you can create you can see the emotion, the frequency that basically forms within this water. And so for me, it was just trying to go down that path. But it's cool to see how with your building, we can kind of bring it in together, that you're starting to incorporate it with there. How, I guess the question is, what is it? What kind of building is it? Is it a dome? Is it, a normal regular structure? And then how are you trying to implement the phi? Like where?
So I got into the golden ratio originally because Viktor Schauberger.
Yeah, let's go down Schauberger. Yeah, I like this.
Yeah, Schauberger was, I don't want to pigeonhole him, but he did believe in Hermeticism. And in the Hermetic tradition, they really, really value the phi ratio. And so for them, they use the pentagon and the pentagram as a symbol to encode the phi ratio. Because if you were to look at a pentagram is 3 triangles that all have the phi ratio in them, and they're turned at the phi ratio to each other. And that makes the pentagram. And then if you link all the points of the star, then you end up with a pentagon, and then you have 5 more phi ratio triangles.
Right.
So to them, they were saying, okay, like if everybody has seen the picture of, Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, where his legs are slightly split and his arms are out, and the angles of everything within that of the perfectly proportioned human has this ratio that's all throughout the body, but then it's also within their field around them. And so I know it's really popular in the podscape realm to be talking about the cosmic egg, but essentially if you were to take a pentagon, and spin it, and if you were to spin it at a certain speed, what that would do is that would create a 3-dimensional curved thing, which would be an egg. So if you were to take the curves off of it, like it's kind of convoluted to explain how that happens, but it creates this egg, which is like the cosmic egg.
Right.
And so Schauberger introduced that to my consciousness, and it was like, all I ever knew about the pentagram was Satanists were into it, but it was actually, the Satanists invert everything. They take the beautiful and they invert it.
Right.
But what they're doing, or what that whole thing from the Pythagoreans, or you could just say anybody that was into the classical sciences of looking for the proportions in everything, like what is the linking element in everything. They found that this phi ratio, the Hermeticists especially, found that the phi ratio really gives, as Schauberger put it, he said it was the perfect marriage between economy and beauty. So what he meant by that is nature uses this because it allows you to have the least amount of material and the most amount of strength, while looking good.
Right.
Which is awesome, right? You know, that
Yeah.
makes so much sense. It's like it's a very very economical way. When I say economical, just efficient. That's
Right,
a
of
good way of
course.
looking at it. And so his whole thing was like, well, we should store water in vessels that are shaped. The shape is based off phi ratio. And so I got into building egg-shaped water tanks. And
Hmm.
that got me into building domes because with a dome, you have, you know, on one side of an egg, you have just a hemisphere. So it's just like, you know, half of a sphere.
Right.
But on the other side of the egg, you actually have, if you were to take a vesica Pisces, which is two circles that are overlapping each other, and then bisect that, you end up having the other side of the egg. So what you do is you can connect that hemisphere with a, we called them lancet arch domes because half of a vesica Pisces is a lancet arch. You put those together, you have an egg. And I was like, oh, cool. I can build egg-shaped water tanks and, you know, go ahead and have that imprint the higher tones, the higher octaves
Right.
into the water and have that structure of the water. So I don't know if you've seen them, but there's tons of different egg-shaped water vessels that people,
I haven't.
you know, oh
It's,
man, you got,
I know. I do. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just now listening. I'm like, there's such a thing like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's in fact, I have, let me see, I have this one website.
Dude, I say
I
you
was
want to
referred, I
screen
was
share it?
referred, I don't know how to screen share.
So I can multiple. So I put it on there. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, where like the chat, the record, there should be like a thing that says share screen potentially for
Okay,
you. No, I
let's see here. Yeah, share screen.
yeah. So you should be able to share.
Okay, cool. So share, so
Yeah.
open system preferences. This is my first time with Zoom on this computer.
Dude, no worries, man. Keep it
Okay, so it
pretty
says
simple.
security and privacy.
Should yeah, say I'm just I can share. How many people share at the same time? You should be able to.
Yeah, I'm in the security and privacy thing. I don't allow the apps below to record contents. That has nothing to do with you.
No. Um. Hmm.
Yeah, I hit share screen and then I hit desktop one.
Yeah, that's usually how it works. If you and it's then and there's that when it's saying don't you have to like do something else.
Open system preferences. Okay, I clicked on you.
And say, well, while he's doing that, you know what is cool when you bring up Viktor Schauberger, when you're bringing up these brilliant minds that have been ahead. Well, I don't want to say ahead of the game. They've been on point with the game. We're just now finding out about them, or we've been late to the party to know what they're doing and what their research, their observations. And Schauberg's one of those that, similar to you, when I heard first about him, I was like, interesting. And then once I like really started diving in and digging, I was like, this stuff's already been out there. What the fuck? I was like, this is incredible. And then you just, a friend of mine, a close friend of mine, we were looking to even trying to do um, similar to kind of what you said, but not big water filters, but doing smaller prototypes.
Uh-huh.
He wanted to do stuff with like filtration systems. So anyway, he kind of brought me on to like help with that. So I was like, I spent probably like 3 months because before we moved, so it kind of things went crazy just because he was moving, we were moving. But I was doing like 3 months of just like looking into Schauberger, looking into how to do these things, the ratios. So I maybe not as much as you, but I'm definitely a little bit more privy to what he was doing and what he was able to accomplish. And it just makes, we know this, we get this, but when you take a step back and go, man, we're ahead of our time, we're inventing, we're part of this growth and innovation. It's like, if only people knew what was already happening or what's already out there, you would be like, wait, we can't even do that now? Like what? You know what I mean? Like just looking at what they were doing with health, really health, beauty, as you said, being efficient. Now we're just wasting. A lot of times we're just wasting products. We're not even making it, or whether it's on purpose or not, that's besides the point. But
Yeah, everything is upside down and backwards. We're not evolving, we're devolving.
yeah, dude, it's so true. Well, this plays into the water aspect. If you actually, and I know you get it, but when you
Yeah.
see that if you're not in tune, or whatever people want to call it, in harmony with nature, whatever the frequency and vibration is, your body is going to feel that. You're going to feel it physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Being that we're not really taught this, our minds can't comprehend the stuff we're saying for a lot of people, of like, well, it might be have something to do with that you're not in proportion, you're not in the proper ratio of phi, or the golden ratio. And that's for me what's interesting too, because people might take a step back and go like, okay, like hold on a sec, and then you can simply say like, hey, look at this car, look at this building, look at this flower, like why is it beautiful to you? And people are like, I don't know. You're like, golden ratio. Yeah,
Right.
that one,
Right.
that one. I mean, I take my son out all the time. We're always looking, going on walks on the beach. We're going, different paths, and we're finding flowers, seashells, all this stuff. And it's cool to watch him. He's only 2, but like looking at it, and you see like him, you can almost tell like he's like, this is fascinating, because he'll be touching things, throwing things. But sometimes when you catch one that's really pretty, like he'll just stop and like look at it. It's also a great time for me to even slow myself down, stop and look at it, observe it, see, I know what I'm looking for, but just really looking into the detail. Like when we look at paintings, like we're looking at every little detail. What's that one painting where the dude did the dots? I can never remember,
I don't
but
remember.
you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I do.
it's it's
Yeah.
it's that type of attention where people are so engrossed with the details, the minute details, where you see people like get really close to see, can I see each dot? And it's
Mhm.
now going, well, guess what, that perfection, that beauty, that being meticulous, is God's creation all around us. And we just, a lot of
Yes.
times we take it for granted, and it's in us.
Yes.
And that's the thing, is we take ourselves for granted. We put ourselves down. We don't give ourselves enough, not to, from an egotistical way, but the affirmation, like, hey, I'm supposed to be here. There's a reason I'm here. I have purpose.
Right. Well, there's so much, going around with the whole, the ideas between terrain theory and also, your innate, I guess, I don't even know how to say it, germ or viral theory, and like which one is it? And like for me, ever since studying Schauberger, it's all terrain,
Mhm.
because at least from the Hermetic point of view, the you have the outside works its way in and the inside then reflects its way out. So,
Right.
you know, he was very adamant in saying that, the way you could tell where a civilization was by the quality of their water, the quality of their forests, and the quality of their music.
Mhm.
So those 3 things, given that criteria, look at where we're at.
That's it.
And so, you can, if anybody right now is that egotistical to think that we're the pinnacle of evolution, that
Right.
they're not really paying attention. I
Right.
don't know if you I had told this story before on Mike Williams' podcast, but when I was a little kid, I was enamored with this photo in my grandmother's house. And it was a picture of my family at the turn of the 20th century. So it was like 1901 or
Mhm.
1902 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And everybody was like square jaw, lean, dressed to the nines.
Right. Right.
The women were like, just classy, like everything, the lace and the like long sleeves, all wearing black. I mean, it was a black and white photo, so things might not have been black, but they looked black. And I remember everybody's eyes, nobody smiled, but everybody's eyes were big.
Mhm.
I remember just looking at this picture, and there was like 12 or 13 people in this picture, and I was just like, I would look and look, and I was just like, these people are gorgeous, like beautiful, and they're what they were wearing was beautiful.
Right.
And then more I looked at the photo, the more I could tell everybody behind them that were walking in the streets were beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I remember reflecting on it and being like, I don't see that now.
Right.
And that was in the 80s, man. That was like, what the 80s is compared to even now is like, worlds different, like
Totally.
the level of disproportion now, the level of unhealth now, like give me a break. Like,
Well,
no.
and that's the thing too, man, is similar to yours, not with the picture, but I'll just like, we'll be here on the beach and you just see, I just kind of scan the beach just to look around, see who's around, and you kind of see the same thing, but it's not in a pleasant way. And it's unfortunate because you're looking at it going like, as you said, this is our idea of like pinnacle of the human, race. And you realize you're like, most of these people here can't get into the water. And I'm not talking about just old people. I'm like, they physically can't get in and they can't get out. And this isn't
Right.
being mean. This is just an observation
Yeah.
without multiple people helping them. And it's unfortunate because you're kind of going into the human potential of knowing everything you said about Schauberger with what your water's like, what your forests are like, and obviously what your music is like. It's realizing there's a potential within all of us that truly is just waiting to be tapped into. And the
Yeah.
more I dive into this, and I'm talking to people like yourself, reading, doing my own observations, my own experiments in many ways, like I realize I'm like, there's so much that we have yet to uncover. And there's so much that we're kind of, people are chipping away. And then I'll be like, man, this is wild. And I'll look and was around in like the 1800s. And
Oh yeah.
yeah. And again, just goes back to our
Yeah.
point where it's like, there is a bit of a cycle here. And you see that, maybe if you want to chime in from here, it's going, this degradation that occurs. And the question I now will present to you is, what do you think this degradation is? Where do you think it's coming from? Because we're seeing that things are cyclical. We see, you know,
All the degradation is engineered. So I've now moved back into the Midwest, and I've been aware of chemtrails in Central America since 2011. When I first got there, I didn't see any, but after about 5 years, I started to see them, and then I'm like, huh. And then I could really see like how they're engineering weather fronts, and I became really aware of that, like with Katrina, when I lived in Florida, and watched how they like pulled Katrina all over the place and, steered it in all these weird ways. I really think the majority of our devolution is engineered. I think the food, the poor quality food, the pollution, all these things are completely unnecessary.
yeah,
And they're not just there because of profit motive. I don't believe that. I don't think that's the case. And as far as I can tell, every time there's these cycles that occur where it's kind of funny. I was talking to my wife back in the day when I used to be into Vedanta Advaita. I read the Puranas and the what was the other big Indian text? Well, let's just say one of their
right,
mythological texts, and they were describing what the Kali Yuga is like. And they were like, in the Kali Yuga, essentially everything will be gamified. Everything will be, somebody making a bet, betting on something else. And everything that the truth will be completely obscured, and what is false will be exalted. Not that it's just out there, but what is lied is exalted.
right.
And if we're not in that right now, I don't know what we're in, right? Because that really seems to be, the standard operating process right now, practice. But I really think whoever is doing the engineering that the mundane live in, they, from what I read about the great work from the Masonic tradition, is that apparently the great work is to stress us in every single way possible. And then from their mindset, the cream will rise to the top. And so when the cycle ends, that cream will survive, and then that will be what seeds the next cycle. And that's as far as I understand it. I really, really, really think the majority of all the shenanigans that, that we get to go through are all falsely, when I say falsely engineered, they're real, but they're not what's natural. It's a synthetic imprint that's being overlaid God's natural phi ratio. I was wondering today, with all this synthetic biology that they're finding in the jabs, I'm wondering if there's any phi ratio that they can find in those little organisms.
Dude,
because I know in the past I had read a bunch of things where they said, like, in anything that is like natural, you can find the phi ratio.
Dude,
so
yeah,
it's a good question to ask the people that are actually looking at this stuff and studying it.
I was thinking the same thing. Maybe not exactly the way you were, but I was thinking about, is through this journey, with all these injections and things like that, is there something molecularly that people have found that is similar? But I wasn't going into as much, but it was just looking at it more from the sense of like knowing that we are made it in the image of God, and it is perfect, because it really is. When you actually look at how, and I always use healing as my debate point. If I am in any sort of debate, it's like just understanding like your body's constantly always trying to protect you. Therefore, there has to be a perfection that is kind of like the engine behind that, right? Like, and if we know we're vibrations and frequency, well, what is that perfection, right? Because the way I break it down is like this. Like, you and I can sit there and eat something or do something, inhale whatever's in the air, and we might be okay. Like, our body's okay. And people will say ultimately, oh, you have a strong immune system. It's like, oh, you just have a better immune system. But it's still knowing that those things, similar to like, what they want to call, a virus or whatever, it's still getting into people. But why is it affecting more people than others? And as we know, it's your thoughts, it's what you're eating, it's the water, it's what you're even listening to, it's the force, like it's all of it. But it goes back to, again, that's all vibration and frequency. It's ratios. It's mathematical in many ways. So as to the point of the phi is going like, is there that much phi that's basically generating your ability to be like, oh, this pesticide, not a big deal. It's easy to get rid of, right? Not just saying, oh, I have a good immune system, but going like, no, are you in that perfect ratio? Like, is that what allows you to have a good immune system? Does that make sense? Like,
it makes total sense. And I think that's what the Satanists, or whatever you want to call them, are having such a hard time with, is like, they're like, man, we have to make these poisons smaller and smaller and smaller, because there's all these, autocorrect
totally
mechanisms in our being, in our energy. Because like, what our material self is just a reflection of what our spiritual self is.
Totally.
And so this is just the concrescence of our spirit. And so when they're working backwards, they're trying to go material to spirit, and I actually think they're trying to hit in all directions.
I agree.
The way they work on our spirit is through convenience, but at least with how they're trying to attack us in the physical world, it's kind of lame. I mean, and I understand in a free will universe, that's the way they have to do it. Like in a free will plane of existence, they actually, oh, I hear a naked baby. Uh-oh, we got a new podcaster.
Oh, hi. Hello.
Say hi to Pat.
Say hi. What's is that your daughter?
Yes.
What's
this is Elizabeth. We call her
Elizabeth.
Ellie.
Hi.
Say hi.
Welcome. Welcome.
Hi. Somebody just got a bath.
Right. I was gonna say, my little one, he's always happy to get in the water when it's his time, but
Yeah,
yeah, baby. I have a baby
baby.
boy too. Well, baby boy. How old are you,
Mm.
Elizabeth?
She's 17 months.
Wow. Big girl.
Mhm. Yeah, and she is just a ham.
I was
She,
gonna say, she seems like she can move well, like climbs on stuff.
oh man, we do our baby gymnastics every day. Like I'm
Yeah.
tossing her up in the air. Oh, mom will get you agua.
All right.
Yeah, yeah, mom will get you agua.
Bye-bye. Oh, could stay on.
Yeah, yeah, she's yeah. Have you've done dumbbells before as a personal trainer, right?
Yeah, of course.
And you've done kettlebells, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, she is my kettlebell dumbbell.
I
Like
was gonna say,
I'm tossing her around.
dude.
You know,
Oh yeah.
these pythons didn't get this big just naturally. You know, that you
Well,
had to pick up the monster baby.
dude, it's so true, man. Oh, oh, oh. I was gonna say she seems like with the squirming, you know what it's like. You're constantly like working muscles you might have forgot you had because you're just trying to hold them. And you're like, come back.
It's
Yeah,
awesome. It's
dude.
awesome. And I what I love about her too, and I bet all babies or most children are like this, is like, you know, when they start to get bored, they get like really antsy. So it
Mm,
forces me, like if I have her in the stroller, or if I'm like, it forces me to adapt into some sort of new movement.
yep,
And it's awesome.
dude. I think well to
Woo! All right. You didn't see my beautiful wife, but she just
hello, how are you?
yeah.
Say, welcome to our nice chat.
Yeah.
Dude, I mean, that's the cool thing about just that experience. And that, you know, from my point too, is you get to spend time with your kids, but you also get to make it an ability to work on you and your growth and physically, even mentally, emotionally, you know, because as you said, like there'll be times where I'll be with him and like we'll go walk to a beach, for example, that we like. And in order to get to that sandy part that's really nice, it's chill, we have to go through some rocks. And the thing is if
Mhm.
I'm trying to walk him and our stuff, like he can do it, but it's slippery. So sometimes it's just easier to hold him, like if it's a high
Mhm.
tide. So I'll be handling him and he'll sit pretty well, but he'll kind of squirm. And I'm now navigating these rocks. So it's learning not only just physically staying calm and like staying controlled, but it's like the emotional sense of like, you know, oh my gosh, like what if he does this? What if this happens? Oh my gosh, what if I step? And it's people like, well, why would you go? And it's like, it's only 30 feet. However, it's one of those things of as a parent, you're just having to adapt. You're having to move with it. And it, for me, I find it fun. Like now it's going like, all right, I got, you know, his bag in one hand. I'm doing a farmer's carry. I got him here. You know, I have the wind, you know, you're dealing with the wind. And before you know it, like by the time I get there, I've worked through every range of motion. Like, you know, you're walking on barefoot. So I don't want to, you know, you have to look out for rocks and you have to adapt to your foot. And that's what
Yeah.
being alive, in my opinion, is like. Because now it's like I'm doing this, making it fun. My son thinks it's interesting. So he wants to do it with me rather than, you know, being like, oh, go in this class and figure it out. It's like we're doing it together, you know, over
Right.
time. Now he's getting older, so I can do it with him. Like he can do it with me a little bit more. But, you know, that's the cool, that's just for me, what makes it exciting. It brings back some of this human potential we've been talking about.
Yeah, I agree. Years ago, I started a pretty good friendship with Dr. Jennifer Daniels,
I want to
and
get
she,
her on. I've been trying.
yeah, she's pretty badass. And
Legend.
I had her stay at my place a little bit in Costa Rica, and she gave me a really good parenting, like a really good way of looking at parenting. She was like, you know, they came here to actually be around you.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yep.
they want to be included in your life.
Yep.
And so, and the way she homeschooled her kids, like her kids, like when she had her full on practice in New York, her kids were, you know, in the office, and she just gave them discrete rules and told them this, that, and that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all turned out great.
Dude.
And I really see that. Like my daughter wants to be engaged with what I'm engaged with. Like she wants to be part of it. And so I think one of the best things my parents did with me was they always included me in what they were doing. And they just said, okay, here, if you want to be hanging out with the adults, which I did, this is what you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so my wife and I are in agreement that that's sort of the way we're going to raise our little one. Is just like, okay, you're here with us.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome,
Like,
man. And
and
well, let me ask you this. Do you see that she's, not that milestones matter per se, but do you find that she catches on to things quicker purely
oh,
for that
definitely.
age?
Yeah. She's a beast. Like at 17 months, the things that she's doing
Right,
and retaining, and like, I mean, I've never had a child before, so it's all new to me.
right.
But like everybody that meets her and is like, wow, she's that old. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we thought she was 2 or whatever. It's just like, So,
That's awesome.
my wife has been incredible with, the breastfeeding, and we eat a really good diet.
That's
And,
great.
the pre-birthing process, we are very conscious of, like, the whole process was a conscious process. Like there wasn't any part of it that, at least from my perspective, that, wasn't considered,
Right.
and that there wasn't, like, forethought into what we were going to be doing.
That's
You
awesome.
want to be on the podcast again?
Yeah, she's more welcome. I mean, we're talking about all the good stuff. Hi. Hello. Say, you have a wonderful smile.
She's like, look, my eyes are the perfect golden ratio.
I was gonna say, most parents are like,
The-
"Oh, your kid's eyes are beautiful." You're like, I'm assuming you're talking about the golden ratio. And yes, they are. Yeah.
He's like,
No.
look, my toes are too. Like,
I was gonna say the what's cool is when you watch hello when you're watching, you said watching kids and going back to even the body, you see how they move their body with such freedom. And I looked into this obviously with being a trainer, but I recently, just very recently, and I'm having them on the podcast. Have you ever heard of the GOTA movement technique?
No.
So it stands for greatest of all time athlete movement technique. So GOAT A. And what was cool is my buddy, shout out Rob Edward. He has a podcast too, really good dude. He heard on I think it was Alpha Vedic or something. There was a woman talking about natural birthing processes, like talking
Mhm.
about that whole world, and she, I guess, brought it up, and I never heard of them. And anyway, their focus is actually on what we're talking about, is knowing how to move the body in this with the golden ratio proportions within our body, knowing where they are, how they lie, and basically how to reestablish, for most people now, reestablish that foundation and that sound uh, ratio within the body. And one of the big ones is specifically talking about the feet. And I've been going hard about researching on the feet and looking into that because there's so much gravy to it. I mean, the whole body in general, but with the feet specifically, like you can look at the etymology of the bones and the different structures in the foot, all the way to the actual functionalities and things like that. And so they talk a lot about it, and they actually show you even in the ankle bone, the calcaneus, where it's connecting into your shin and your ankle joint. When they basically cut through it, you're looking at the golden ratio there, and knowing then as pro athletes, being one yourself, like, okay, well, why were certain people getting injured? Taking out any sort of physical contact. Like if I get someone who hits me in my shin, in my foot, like that doesn't count. Like just purely based off of your own injuries of like running, throwing, etc. And they were able to show with slow-mo, like what exactly is going on in that foot. And what we're seeing a lot for a lot of people is that valgus internal. Yeah, exactly. And so it's knowing, and what we're seeing obviously with my job too, is seeing how many people have bunions, how many people have their toes all turned. And when you look at every single child, every single person, unless you were born with some defect, that's not occurring. That's something that's happening over time.
So this is directly, like, this is my story that you're talking about. So
sure.
I'm Pisces.
Yeah, yeah.
Pisces, their main contraindication is through their feet.
Mhm.
Okay. So I was born with extremely high arches and very wide forefeet,
Right.
which is a terrible combination for sneakers, especially somebody that was coming up in the 80s
Yeah.
and 90s. Like they didn't make different width shoes or anything like
One
that.
size fits all,
But
man.
in the few like high end cleats I could buy that had leather that was soft enough, I'd rip through them in a month.
I was gonna say they didn't last.
No. So it was really interesting for me because when I would train, I was an overachiever. I was a 5'9", 195-pound white boy that was trying to like keep up with like super athletes.
Right.
And I was able to hold my own, but my feet didn't like it because I would look at my friends, especially my black friends, and I'd look at the proportion of the length of their foot relative to the height of their body relative to their weight.
Right.
So me as a 5'9", 195-pound white guy with size 9 shoes,
Mm.
very wide, triple E, but very high arches. That meant my contact patch of my foot when it would make contact with the ground was very little relative to my mass.
Mm.
I had some of my friends that were my weight that were wearing size 12 and size 13 shoes. So their capacity to cut, their capacity for lateral acceleration
Right.
was like light years from mine because I was essentially running on a pogo stick.
Right. Right. Comparatively, for sure.
With I had hooves, I was a ruminant animal. So it was really amazing. My senior year in college, I had so many credits that my girlfriend was like, "Hey, take a yoga class with me." And this was 1997. I was like, "Okay, I'll take a yoga class with you." And I went in there and I was the only guy in there.
Right.
It was like 20 hotties and me. So I loved it, of course.
Yeah.
And
Like, I'm a
and
kicker, by the way. Just, oh,
with
sorry. Yeah, namaste. I'm a kicker. I'm a kicker.
no, I didn't do that at all. Like I was actually, because I always had like pride in my athleticism.
Right,
And
right.
so of course I'm being torn down because the yoga instructor is like this 90-pound ex ballerina. She's never lifted a weight in her life. She could
Mhm.
naturally like stick her head up her butt. And here I am, this like muscle bound, jock. And
Right.
I had flexible, hip flexors and hamstrings, but nothing else. And so she would just make fun of me the entire class. Like she was just like, "Oh, you have the worst body. You have you have short, stubby feet. You have thick thighs, thick shoulders, long torso." Like like she just worked me so hard and I loved it.
Yeah.
But she was right. But here's the funny thing. Like I got really good at yoga very quickly because I applied myself and I loved it. Like all my back pain went away. Like all these
Mhm.
things that the Western doctors were saying were horrible about my body. Um, it all disappeared like within a couple months. And so I just started to do it like a lot. And I ended up coming across some pretty high end Vedic, excuse me, not Vedic. What's it called? I'm forgetting the name now. I'll remember it in a second. In the whole Indian mythos of yoga, it's essentially like the core of the asana
Mhm.
principles. And some of these, because yoga is an eightfold path and asana is only one of the path. Asana is the postures.
Mhm.
And so they were like, they analyze your body and they're like, "Oh man, like your dosha is totally off." And they're like,
Right.
they were like ripping me down. Like on every stage, every process I've ever jumped into, I get ripped down. And they're like, they were looking at my feet and they literally like, "How did you do what you did? Like how did you do it?" And like I literally would have these bloody socks at the end of practice because there wasn't any shoe that when I was playing football fit me correctly. And certain coaches wouldn't allow you to wear a shoe other than what the company was that represented them. So
Right.
one time I had Reebok, which was like the worst,
Jeez.
representing our football team, and they made the most narrow cleats. And as a kicker, you have to have the shoe has to be tight fitting. Like you can't have the shoe be too long relative to your foot or you're
Right.
kicking the dirt, right? And so, my God, I felt like a geisha girl, dude. Like, I had my feet like bound like this. I mean,
They wake up, they're like underneath, like,
yeah, it was the
yes.
worst season I ever had because I can never, because when your feet are that tight too, and the cold weather comes out, and
Oh
then
yeah,
your
dude.
shoes get wet. Oh, it was
Mhm.
horrific. It was
Dude,
just so bad.
brutal.
So it took me, my yoga instructor, he was a deep Raja yoga, and he was like, I want you to go to a pedicure place and get the pedicure. There are these spacers that you put between your toes, and I want you to sleep with them. And I did that for 2 years to release my forefeet. That's how long it took
Dude,
for
yep.
my forefeet to release. And then when I was going to India, my teacher there said, you have to be barefoot. Like you have to be barefoot. You're gonna walk the mountain every morning, not every morning, like 2-3 times a week. You're barefoot.
Hmm.
And to the point where I broke my toe on I was going up the mountain and I broke my toe, and we just taped it up, and I was still not allowed to wear shoes. He's like, your feet are so tough and calloused. We have to break this open. But I have to say, it completely worked. Like I had zero problems with my feet or ankles or knees. And what it happened was when my feet ended up releasing, I could feel everything in my hip girdle.
Hmm.
Like I could feel all the positioning of how when my feet were extremely tense, how that actually was isolating my movement with my pelvic girdle,
Yep.
and what that was having me do with my lower abdomen, which was creating all these lower back problems.
Yep.
When all of that released, then I could actually tilt my pelvis in the correct position,
Yep.
and then my lower back released.
Dude, absolutely. And it's funny to bring that up because that's something that I've been going in my studies with my job specifically for the longest time is going, we're putting so much emphasis into the hip joints and these multiplanar joints, i.e. the shoulder and the hip, as well as the ankle. But most people actually don't even pay attention to the ankle. They're like, let's loosen up your hips, let's loosen up your shoulders. And you realize, or at least I've realized, a lot of it comes in the hands and the feet, because
Absolutely.
everything you just said, neurologically speaking, because we have to, and this is where my journey looking into Walter Russell, Viktor Schauberger, Dr. Tom Cowan, like, I mean, I can go through so many people, but knowing at the heart of what we are as electric beings is that we have to look at the neurological system. And the only thing I constantly harp on all the time is the fascial connection, our fascia, which is, for those who don't know, it's basically the neurological highway that connects, that wraps all around all our muscles and is a highway throughout the body. So, and I don't know how, I'm assuming you're pretty well with your massage therapy.
Yeah.
So instead of me talking, can you tell us about fascia? Because I think it's super important and doesn't get talked about enough.
Well, a lot of what we're talking about overall is about terrain, right? So we're
Hmm.
talking about the model of outside in.
Yep.
So you just brought up the whole thing, like neurologically, the hands and then the feet. And
Mhm.
so in polarity therapy, which is my main modality, what I'll do is once I actually, measure the body and see what's out, I immediately go to the hands and the feet.
Good.
Hands, feet, and then also the occiput, because the way everything, the end of the spine, the way
Mhm.
that aligns, a lot of times, if you put those in the correct position, then the whole rest of the body, it's
Mhm.
signaled, I mean, literally from like the furthest extremity outward in.
Yep.
That's like the Vitruvian man, to get back to like the whole phi.
Yep.
Is like, what's out is in and out, the whole
Right.
thing. And so I found over years and years of doing deep tissue myofascial release, which I think is really, really important. And I will never discount the importance of people receiving a certain amount of touch.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to talk about just the effectiveness of how you can actually realign a body with, like, as Viktor Schauberger said, like simple, cheap, and easy, like the simplest inputs, like the majority of people's hips that I reset, it's like literally like three little moves on the foot relative to the pubic bone, and their hips will go directly back into place.
Right.
And it's not, and I remember for years when like doing Rolfing and doing all the myofascial release and deep elbows and the gluteus minimus, and I think that's really good from an energetic and electrical exchange perspective. And so many people are so under-touched that they need that type of interaction, and they really thirst for it. Because I got so good at doing adjustments that I just started just doing adjustments, and my clients were like, "What? You're not going to touch me anymore?" Like, they did feel comfortable saying that, but that was like
Dude, it's true though. It's so true.
That was the move, and I was just like, yeah, okay,
Well,
And so that,
real quick, dude, I had in my, 10 plus years, I legit can tell you over 24 clients who all I did was stretch them. Like
yeah,
because I couldn't legally, massage, but I would do these stretches like an hour, like pure hour of stretching, and like a sweating by the end of it, because people are so tight, but they love that physical. There's like a physical touch that they were like, into, and it never was weird. It wasn't like people were being, it was just physically like, this feels a release of tension. And, as you said, most people don't have connection with anybody.
yeah, like I'm looking at how much we play with our daughter, and like neither my wife or work a conventional job, so she is being touched
Right.
like all day. She's super strong and super flexible. She's being breastfed. The girl can eat anything. Like, she just like,
Right.
I look back to when I was born, both my parents worked. I'd never received the boob. I think I received the boob for a few days. Then I was on formula. I was touched by strangers. You can take that for what that's worth.
Yeah, right.
So, and my body became extremely calloused.
Right.
And by the age 14, I was a rage monster,
Yeah.
And I needed to kick a ball, 100 times a day to release that rage. I needed to ride my bike miles and miles and miles to like, so it's going to be interesting watching her development and see the difference in the psychology, just from, a child that's not being neglected, not being neglected on any front, because, as being somebody that deals with people's bodies intimately, you're mainly dealing with neglect.
Yep.
It's just neglect. Like, you can boil it all down to neglect.
Yep.
And they're either feeling neglected, they're self-neglecting, they're, it's all neglect. And so it's a really remarkable, it helps me. It's kind of interesting in my consciousness how shifting out, the second I no longer felt neglected and that I actually was receiving everything I needed, the actual transformation of my clientele.
Interesting.
It'll be very interesting to see in your path how that works.
Well, it's already occurred. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've been doing with a lot of clients I've worked with in the past, some of them have kind of been like, hey, not really into it anymore. Like, this is, I want to just go. I don't want to, this is maybe a little slow. We're focusing on things that maybe I don't want to address. But at least the ones that I'm still work with, as we go through this, you see the excitement of like, man, this is great. And it's also brought more people that I've never, through the internet, and people who are showing more interest in what I'm talking about. Because, and I've talked about this in other podcasts, but what I'm essentially aiming for is taking people through the alchemical process. That's what I realized. When you look at from the perception of the body has to go through this internal fire in order to exercise, there's no question about it.
Negrito.
Huh?
The negrito.
Wait, what's the negrito?
In the alchemy process,
Yeah.
is when you take the matter, the mother, the material, and then you essentially burn it. You burn it down to its core elements, and that's called the negrito.
So that's
the negrito.
I didn't know that's what it was called, but that's exactly what I'm always trying to aim to do. But it's now taking a step further. Like, okay, I know that we're trying to put you through an alchemical process. That being said, what can we do to help facilitate that process? Because maybe you can chime in for your own experiences, but also as a massage therapist, is people get to a certain point where they're aiming for potential, they're finding themselves overcoming a stress of some kind, and people either they pull themselves away from it. There's this like fear of getting to a potential. And a lot of times I've come to witness is that it's like, one, they didn't believe in themselves. That's one part. But two, this is something I feel like in regards to what we talked about with the gut intuition, energetically speaking, I'm like, their frequency's off. There's something that isn't aligned. And I didn't know when this was really starting to come into my field, I didn't know what I was experiencing, but now I know there's an energetic component to this person in what we're doing and what they say they want, that's not in alignment. So now it's led me to looking at the water in the body, the golden ratio, looking at, obviously with the golden ratio, you're looking at people's posture. And it's not just about sitting tall. Because that's one of the biggest misconceptions that I've come to understand. And to your point earlier about your yoga instructor being an ex-ballerina, all this stuff, some of the most pain-driven people I've ever come in contact with are all bit dancers, ballerina. Because I was in New York City, so I was people at Alvin Ailey. I was dealing with people at like these, the Juilliard school. Like I was working with people all the time, and I was going, why are all of these dancers who are super flexible? Why are they in pain in their back? Like, why is there this?
Their feet. Exactly. The majority of dancers I've worked on,
exactly,
their feet are so brutalized, and then the foundation of their body is in pain.
Right. And what it's also too is you might have seen, a lot of them are forcing themselves in positions over time. But when we understand the difference between getting yourself into it comfortably, learning how to move within that stress, you're either going to receive the stress with this, like, hey, I'm okay, we can do this, we can get through the stress together, or it becomes almost like a traumatic experience. So yeah, you might do it, but your body's responding in a traumatic way where it's now holding that memory in all the wrong ways. And that's what I was experiencing time and time again. And a lot of that is obviously the structure in the water, in the body, the salt specifically, but it's also knowing that fascial highway that's going on throughout the body for a lot of people, is that these muscles are creating this tension all the time. Like you said, you're like just wound up, like tense. And that fascia, as you know, and for people listening, is creating that response of going, we have to be here to protect you. Whatever traumas, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, we're doing this to protect you. And if you try to go and, put your hand over your head or whatever the case is, we can't allow you to do that the way you might want to. So we're going to do this, or we're going to get this far. And it's just one of those things that really opened my eyes as we sort of look at it, like, okay, how can we look at this from the human potential in the body and creation, nature, showing us these perfect relationships, these perfect mathematical ratios and things. How can we apply it to the body? And through that, I've seen, just for myself specifically, but also through my clients, mostly are remote now. They're all remote. So there is that missing component of being present with the people in the space, but a lot of good feedback, a lot of good responses from the people I've worked with. So you know.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. So that was my long-winded, but with to bring this back to the body from your point of view and what you're experiencing when you're dealing with people's tensions. You said the feet is where you're finding most of the problems. What is it that
I
you're?
wouldn't say I find the problems everywhere, but
Yeah.
I usually use the feet as a solution.
Yeah. So okay, let me ask you this then. Take it down this route. So you find it everywhere. Do you see a correlation with feet in a certain emotion? Do you feel like there's hands, certain emotion? You said obviously neglect in regards to people feeling the need to be touched, but like, do you see a lot of people who are like anxiety driven? Like, oh, you're, yeah, I see that. I go to your feet if you're someone who's talking a lot about anxiety, or is there an emotional component that you attach to certain parts of the body?
Yeah, and it's also specific to whether they're male or female, and it's specific to where and when I'm actually working on them.
Mm,
Especially being down in Costa Rica as long as I was, I would watch over and over and over again everybody tied to the moon cycle, to the lunar cycle, because the ground there is paramagnetic and the moon is paramagnetic. So our bodies would be in a chaos sandwich all the time there. To find the ground current there is very difficult.
mhm.
So there would be these waves that would move through people, and depending on whether or not the body was, presenting the positive pole or the body was presenting the negative pole, would really determine what contraindications would show up. And then people's astrology would really come up with it. Like I got into astrology because I was into bodies.
Mhm.
So when we talk about the feet, we're talking about the Pisces archetype. The
Right.
Pisces are two fish that are going in opposite directions. Well, it's just like your feet when you're walking, you
Yep.
know.
Yep.
And so you can imagine the soles of your feet are the Piscean fish, and you work your way up, you go backwards in the zodiac. So the ankles are Aquarius, the knees are Capricorn, so on and so forth. And so I really became super like into it because I was seeing these archetypes in people's holding patterns. So I had a ton of Scorpio friends that had crazy, crazy things happening with their sexuality. Like I guess the best way you could say, like the better way of saying a contraindication is like somebody's blind spot,
Mhm.
like where they can't see why their life isn't going the way they're going. And so like all depending on their natal astrology would really, it ends up playing out in the body ends up being sort of like the tell of the tape with
Dude,
that.
it's
And
wild, isn't it?
yeah, I really like I cannot even tell you how many of my Taurus friends have neck problems. Like it's like every single one of them.
Yeah.
Or if I meet somebody and they end up telling me, oh yeah, when I was a little kid, I fell off a jungle gym and hit my head, and I have had like 4 concussions. I'm like, are you Aries by chance? Oh, how did you know? Like
Yep.
there's like, I mean, it happens over and over and over and over again. Like
Dude.
to the point, like my best friend's Capricorn, and I was telling him all this stuff, and he's a devout Christian. He didn't want to hear it, and I was like, oh, okay, no problem. And he's like, anyway, none of that stuff pertains to me. You talk about Capricorns and knees. I've never had a knee problem, this, that, and the other. The guy literally had a secondary bone grow off the quadricep in his quadricep, just above the knee.
Wow. That's
I was like,
it's
I was
so
like, ding, 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 like, and he's like, he is the Capricorn archetype, like
oh yeah.
full on. And so I have to say, part of the fun of doing body work for me is actually seeing the sabotage, is actually seeing the blind spots that people hold in their body, And I think the only reason why I've been so popular is because I can actually eloquently talk to a person, because their consciousness overruns the body. So you can do all the body stuff, and we've already established most bodies are undertouched, but when you can touch somebody's soul by explaining, by releasing this enigma that they've had in their field, you can release that from them by just being able to accurately describe what's happening in their body, and then relate that to some psycho-spiritual emotional thing. Man, you'll have a client forever.
Dude, it's true.
And I don't even want clients forever. I tell my clients, I don't want, if I have you for a long time, I'm not doing my job right. That's not my bag. I'm not,
Right.
big pharma. I don't want a lifetime partner in this. But it's really amazing, because I say this all the time to my clients. All the body is to me is a buoy in the ocean of consciousness. So depending on where the body is, it will tell it's the buoy in the ocean. It's letting you know, is the tide coming in? Is the tide coming out? What's the salinity of the consciousness? All of it. It just lets you know. And so if you give the consciousness a clean, clear mirror, then you're bearing witness for God. And that's all you need.
Yep.
If you can bear witness for God and be honest about what you're seeing, it's taken care of.
Absolutely, man. That's a great way to look at it, like a buoy in the ocean, man. And it's so what's cool is we're talking about the body, we're talking about electricity, but there is a big component that maybe we can dive into more here too, is that magnetism as well, because there is that huge component as well as this attraction to each other's emotions. Obviously, a lot of it's being used nefariously as well, but it's knowing how to look at ourselves as more than just this vessel with blood and organs, and that's kind of it. It's looking at the fascination of knowing, like, man, we're this electromagnetic being. We're in many ways this battery, and not just a normal battery, but like this conscious spiritual battery as well, because we're, as you say, it's this ever-changing flow of energy that's getting moved around all the time. And what was cool is through my journey of looking into this stuff is when you actually look at how a lot of these batteries are, or not batteries, magnets, they're like the horseshoe magnets, your different polarities. You see the power is right between those two, where the most magnetic field is occurring. Well, I had this idea of going, well, let me see where in the body can I see this? Is there anywhere? And I immediately went to the skeletal system. And if you look at the skeletal system, you will find those horseshoe magnet shapes everywhere.
Oh, wow.
If you look at the hip girdle, your feet naturally kind of go here, connect with the ground, come up through the knees into your hips, the way the acetabulum comes in. Boom, you have yourself a magnet. If you look at your spinal column, you have your main spinal, and then you have all those vertebrae that stick off. Those are just basically magnets going this way. And for me, that was one of those things where I started seeing that. You see it in your shoulders. Look, you can see from my fingers through here, you see there's this they're everywhere. And what's so cool about it is when we were talking back to the hands and feet, is knowing, okay, well, if my my north and south, or my positive, negative, or my feet, my hands, all these parts, it's going like there's just a lack of electromagnetic flow that's occurring through all this. And it also goes mostly to the heart, which we can dive into. I love the rabbit holes with the heart, but it was just, for me, that was really a cool way to look at it, and seeing it and going, this makes sense to me. We are this.
That makes total sense. And getting back to Schauberger, so we're talking about hands and feet, and you're talking about magnets. Well, a lot of people don't know how magnets are actually made. And this is a lot of fun.
Do it.
So magnet is when you take something that's conductive, most magnets are made out of neodymium, some amalgamation of the metal neodymium,
Hmm.
and you send an extremely strong arc of electricity in a direction through the neodymium, and that then creates the magnet. So what used to be called lodestones in nature were these magnetic rocks that people would find out in nature. And it was essentially where lightning had hit some sort of ferrous material that was in a rock. And then that would create I'll never use the word attraction for fear that Ken Wheeler will kill me in my sleep. I study all of his work because he's a brilliant mind in this world. But essentially, what it does is, from his perspective, he calls it a dielectric acceleration.
Mm.
It's not an attraction. And so this dielectric, this is so much fun to talk about, because this is what got me into really exploring the shape of this plane of existence.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this gets me into structuring water, because for a long time I was building water
I love it.
structurizers. Okay, so you send this current through something that's conductive. So current equals electricity, like a lot of electricity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Schauberger was all about what actually runs our body from a physical perspective is electricity, but he defined electricity as temperature differential.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if your core body temperature is 98.6 degrees, your phalanges out in the exterior are at least a 30-degree difference in temperature.
Mm-hmm.
That difference in temperature is all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That creates, as we move with locomotion through this dynamic medium of electrically charged particles, we are essentially a what would it be called, like an electromagnetic sail that's also a dynamo that is taking the temperature differential, and then our heart transduces the difference in temperature from our extremities all the way to our core temperature, and then imparts the charge to the red blood cells, which are metallic.
Yep.
The red blood cells carry ferritin. So they're now carrying this negative charge through our body. And as we're, interfacing with all this positive and negative charge in our environment, this keeps the cycle going over and over and over again. And so when you end up being extremely dynamic in space and time, you can look at that as as I love your analogy of the horseshoe magnet, your charge potential through your horseshoe, your horseshoe magnet, which are your palms, in my business with polarity therapy, it's positive right hand, negative left hand.
Mm-hmm.
Positive just means, propulsion, negative means impulsion. It means attraction.
One's not
propulsion.
good, one's not bad. You need both.
No. And so you can literally, you can go over a person's body and you can feel, oh, I'm being pulled or pushed, pulled or pushed, pulled or pushed. And depending, like we were talking about earlier, there's this beautiful imprint that all healthy bodies are given. And okay, that's natural or unnatural.
Mm-hmm.
This is supposed to be this way, or, oh, wow, this is totally not this way. And then if you actually have sensitivity and you can actually feel the field that you're both sharing, because now you're both within each other's cosmic egg, so depending on the position that they're in, the position that you're in, you're interfacing on that level, and you can just bear witness and see oh, okay, there's something else sponsoring this particular, let's just say for an example, this blockage, this lack of electromagnetic potential reaching its potential.
Yeah,
And it's very accurate.
dude. It's
It,
almost down to like minimal error. That's how like it's insane. And this is I haven't gone into as much as you, but I just through experience.
yeah. And I think we all have the potential to be with it. I mean, every mother that holds a baby and is with the baby and she can feel the slight variations and she's attuned, her heartbeat and the baby's heartbeat and the whole thing.
Yeah,
Like the whole regulation patterns that were once, I think, when we were in our more evolved state, where we were all conscious of it and we could all immediately, if we were out of sync, resync ourselves, re-regulate ourselves.
yeah,
But now I think for the majority, at least, well, I just think for the majority, we've been so over sensationalized that we've kind of lost that capacity to self-regulate in that way.
absolutely. Well, you're on a great point, and you were bringing up structural water and dealing with this charge of water within the body. And I think this
Yeah.
plays into what you're already talking about. So maybe do you want to keep that
Yeah. So this is really neat. So water is known as like the universal solvent. Okay. So structured water is, if you're going to give it a chemical designation, is H3O4.
mm,
A better way of looking at it, I would say, is if you do have in your mind, if you still think of the billiard ball way of looking at the universe, the best way of thinking of structured water is it's like when water becomes a crystal,
mhm,
not a crystal in the sense like it's frozen like ice, but
right.
it's a coherent conglomeration of this H2O molecule just going all across. And when it becomes coherent, what crystals are, they're all the molecules are in phase in something geological. That's what causes it to be a crystal. So it becomes dipolar at that moment, which means it has a positive and a negative. It has a direction in which energy flows in it.
Yep.
And so when our body has enough of this easy water, as Gerald Pollack would say, structured water, Schauberger would say high collagen water, what occurs to our field is we essentially have a superconductor that's in us.
Mhm.
When you have a superconductor, there's no loss. Like the energy that's being pulled, there's no resistance in the system. There's no impedance.
Yep.
if you're an electrical nerd. And so without any impedance, you actually have a higher gain of function. You have the capacity to access higher levels of um, existence.
Mhm.
It's just the
Absolutely.
best way of saying it.
Yeah.
So another way of looking at it is looking at its opposite. Like if you are in areas where there's a lot of electromagnetic pollution and the water has been completely and utterly modified with chemicals, and it's also hasn't been scrubbed of the memory that it's taken on from all the people it's been in and all
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
things it's touched and all that type of stuff, because water is actually where the memory of everything is stored.
Mhm.
That's something I really appreciate. That's the whole thing with the Phi ratios. The Phi ratio is, you could say, is God's memory,
Yep.
because it creates this very specific antenna
Right. Well,
array.
it also just kind of shows into the like what people would call the Akashic record, like when everything is water, when you see how water is going through life. I mean, there's just constantly it's absorbing all the memory. If you
I
look,
wouldn't say everything is water. That's too much
think
of a
so,
generalization. I would say, okay,
near everything.
if you were gonna look and say something was everything, you
Right.
could
Yeah.
easily say that everything that's material is hydrogen.
Yes.
It's some form of hydrogen.
Right.
Hydrogen is it's the first thing on the periodic table, and pretty much everything from that point is a derivation of hydrogen.
Yeah.
So if you want to like make a blanket statement, you could say everything is hydrogen. But this is what's fun. Hydrogen has its highs and its lows.
Yeah.
So what they're finding is in structured water is that the potential of structured water to carry something called protium, which is light hydrogen. When our body is flooded with protium, our body one absorbs it because it's most of our bodies are hydrogen depleted.
Mm-hmm.
You absorb the protium, but then another thing it does is it actually activates, it switches on all the higher functions in your genes, and it turns on your mitochondria.
Hmm.
Its opposite is called deuterium, which is heavy hydrogen. And when our body gets heavy hydrogen in it, that's where all the toxicity flows to.
Right.
It switches off the mitochondria in our body. It will literally go, and the deuterium will find wherever you've been injured, and it will saturate those areas. Like
Jeez.
deuterium is like it's nature's, I guess you would call black ink. It's like it's nature's way of saying, oh, this is exactly where you've messed up.
Yeah, it's just a constant reminder, being like, hey, remember that bad choice you made in college? It's like, yeah.
Yeah, but protium is the opposite. Protium is your higher angel. It comes in, it's like, oh, we'll
Yeah.
scrub that away, we'll wash that
So,
away.
so
There's
what would be heavy hydrogen then? Like, what would be an example for those listening? Like when you say heavy hydrogen or deuterium or
unstructured water has a higher amount of deuterium in it. So like when they used to do these nuclear power plants and they would have to dispose of the water did not have radiation in it. It had deuterium in it.
Interesting.
Yeah, they called it heavy water. And so they dump all this heavy water into the waterways. All these machines, like for years and years and years, I was doing these orgone accumulators, and we were installing the orgone accumulators in cars. And I think orgone is just protium, because what we are doing to structure the water and what we are doing to actually manufacture high volumes of like a rarefied hydrogen. I think what we would experience when we would get the cells to resonate was, I think we were just super saturating with protium.
Interesting.
I think that's what people consider orgone.
Now I was gonna say that definitely that's because I've been learning a little bit more about it, Oregon.
Orgone, yeah.
Oregon, yeah, and that from what you're saying, it's from the people I've heard talk. It sounds like that's definitely in line with what it is, because, and to your point about us, most people being dehydrated or hydrogen deficient, is that you start to see, and I had George Wiseman on the show who has the aqua cure, which is, yeah, and he was going all into it. And it is fascinating when you see that the majority of hydrogen, being that we're like 63% hydrogen, and we're focusing on the 2% of what we are, which is the magnesium and the phosphorus. Right. And it's like, we need to focus on the hydrogen, and just that, right? Is when you're in a line, you get proper structured water that's in line with the golden ratio, your body's able to go into those higher parts of who you are. If there's limitation, well, it doesn't have the chance to go there, just like with hydrogen and how it affects if we're dehydrated, truly dehydrated. First thing is going to go is your reproductive system, because on the chain of command, it's kind of like the least of importance. It's like, hey, we don't have time for this. So then what's next? It becomes the immune system, the immunocomposition of your gut, of, all of that. And then it finally leads to, right, your organs shutting down if you're completely dehydrated. And it's just the same type of, potential that occurs with what you're saying. Is like, all right, lack of structured water, lack hydrogen. Well, now you don't have the chance to be in that place where you are in that, the perfect man, perfect alignment, feeling that energetic charge, feeling what healing is like. Most people, as we know, are in a constant state of disease, and they've just learned that this is their norm. So when you do body work, or you're working in people's true healing, like from the deepest parts of their soul going, I didn't know I can feel like this. This is insane. What is this? And you're like, this is what being alive feels like. This is what a healthy mind, body, spirit is. And that's what through this journey and what you're bringing in is so cool is because it shows you not just that it's possible, but it's like, hey, this is what's missing, or this is what is necessary, or this is the direction to potentially start taking.
But this is the irony of that. So I've touched that perfected state once, where my body had zero pain,
Right.
zero resistance. I was 100% healthy. I could not be around anyone.
Yeah.
I was living in South Florida. I had a condo on the ocean. I was breathing beautiful fresh air every day. I was teaching yoga. I was riding my bike everywhere, doing massage. And I went like years and years and years of doing yoga, had the cleanest diet. I was tridoshically balanced. And I remember I hit that space where it was like, my body had hit that like complete and utter golden ratio tone, like bing. In South Florida at that time, there was literally no one I could be around. Because the level of sensitivity that put me at, and me being an empath, I immediately was even more in everyone else's stuff.
Wow.
With the way I'm wired. Now, I'm not saying that that's the way for everyone, but I have the utmost compassion for people with their buffers. I have the utmost compassion with how people sabotage themselves, because more often than not, when I back out and I take a bigger picture of their life relative to what it is that they want. I'm not saying it's the ideal. I'm not saying it's the best thing, but relative to what they want, and this is a free will universe, they have to be sabotaging themselves the way they're sabotaging themselves.
Yep.
They have to.
Oh, hello.
She just needs to be on the telly.
Yeah, no worries. I hope you guys don't mind.
When you're this pretty,
yeah.
you need to be podcasting. That's what she's saying.
Say, it's just a matter of being like, okay, you guys stop talking about that stuff. What were you saying about me and how good I looked at? Just, I want to keep hearing. No, that's awesome. Oh, dude, I think that's what makes this more truthful and organic, is that this is, at the end of the day, as much as we're talking about the body, like having that ability to be with your children, like that really is what it's about, man. There is no better feeling. I mean, it's hard, don't get me wrong. As you said, there's a sense of stress and, growth within yourself. It's not easy, but having those moments, dude, that's what matters, man.
Yeah. And the thing is, she'll never be that size ever again.
Exactly. Yeah. Dude, I mean, he's growing out of stuff so fast, our son, and he's just every day it's like something new. And we do the same thing. It's just trying to appreciate and value these moments that we have.
Yeah, we only get her that size once.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. But getting back to the whole sabotage thing, I used to be hypercritical of people because I was hypercritical of myself. I had this wanting to be enlightened attitude. And in that wanting to be enlightened attitude, it's perfection.
Right.
Buddha did it, Christ did it, like, the gall. And so I didn't, in that pursuit, I was blind to terrain theory. I was actually blind to, okay, I love certain people. I really respect certain people. I really want to be in certain scenarios and certain situations. None of that is possible in the perfected state.
Right.
Not in this time frame. Not in this specific day and age. in this Kali Yuga, if that's what we're in, like that doesn't happen that way.
Right.
And now when I'm with people, I really ask, like, I don't do like the coaching thing. I'm just like, I just listen to them, and I listen to them like signal me what it is that they're wanting, and I'm like, okay. And relative to what they want is relative to what I'll actually suggest for them.
Mm-hmm.
Because more often than not, like, people, it's kind of interesting. For years and years and years, I was like, why isn't anybody listening to my suggestions?
Mm-hmm.
I'm right. I'm right. Listen to me.
Yeah.
And it would drive me nuts. And it was because the majority of people are just lonely, and they don't really want to get better.
Yeah.
There's like very few people that are actually consciously trying to improve
Yeah.
in a way that isn't vain. Like,
Mhm.
you have lots of people that want to look good naked,
Right. Right.
or, want to perform,
Yeah.
perform to receive acceptance or whatever. But there's very few people in my existence that utterly and truly want the truth. Because I look at wanting the truth and like wanting to get better in a very similar vein,
Mhm.
like truly get better.
Right.
Usually, if you're willing to see the truth of yourself, you're going to get better.
Of course.
And so, I mean, they're few and far between, man.
Dude.
There's so many people that give lip service to it because they've heard it, they've heard people talk about it, but when you really get into it, it's like,
Right. Well,
you just want to be comfortable.
and it's true though, man. And so what you're saying earlier, and what I was saying about being able to tap into your ability to kind of, I don't want to say ascend, but to find the levels of the potential in you is not to be in the mindset of like, I have to be perfect. Cause I'm the same as you, dude. Like I was for the longest time, like I have to be perfect. It was my insecurity. And I realized, well, I knew one that was never achievable. It was always because you're always striving for something. It's a matter of though going, you still want to strive, but it's knowing through the striving that you're gonna have some of your own chaos. You're gonna have this fall. You're gonna have this yin and yang, and that's okay because you're still going through motion. Just like as we know with Walter Russell, like everything is in this vortex. There's constant motion that's occurring through life all around us, even when we're not moving. It's just knowing that if I'm keeping myself energetically moving all the time, you're going to learn from mistakes. I know I'm going to make mistakes, and that perfection isn't the perfection that we have we been told of, like doing everything right. It's going, perfection is knowing, just as you said, I'm going to put myself, at least in my opinion, go on a path where that I'm going to have awareness, I'm going to have knowledge, I'm going to have a coherent thought to seeing when I'm doing stuff that's wrong, learning how to learn from that mistake rather than let that mistake consume me or affect relationships in a negative way. Like I feel like that's part of loosely perfection, is going like, I can acknowledge where I was wrong. I can acknowledge where maybe I didn't handle that the best, or also being at the same time, hey, I know that my hard work brought a positive outcome, or I'm grateful for that experience, right? Like it's having that ability to have that self, I don't say self-love, but knowing like, hey, I know that if I put my work in and I have a genuine heart and I'm going to treat people well, there's a good chance that comes full circle. So it's not coming from ego. It's really just truly coming from what we are, is we're all interconnected. We're connected, and it's knowing how to tap into that and know like, hey, I maybe didn't approach Tophur in a way that was inviting. I can experience, I can feel that, but hey, moving forward, can you forgive me? Or hey, can we grow from this? And then actually making those changes. So what you said earlier, people will be like, yeah, I'm going to make those changes. And then they never do. This is why we're in the mindset of like, oh, people don't change. And it's like, yes, to some degree, but I also feel that, at least my own experiences, there is growth. You don't change completely, but there are changes that occur. because like I know for me, there's certain things that used to bother me or things that would make me insecure that I haven't had any of those experiences, after really doing the work and really focusing on it. Not that I don't have my issues and my things, but certain things I've seen, like, wow, that didn't have the same impact as it once had. You know what I
Right.
mean? So that's just my takeaway from it.
So with that, so like we can get back into water and tie this into
Yeah,
the
yeah,
body and the whole thing.
let's do it.
So the shape of things really determines the consciousness and what's actually going to occur. So I
Mm.
was just talking with Clive DeCarl today. Do you know who he is?
Yeah, he's coming on the show next week.
Oh, cool. So he was showing me his Tesla
Or 2
devices
weeks.
today, and like they have these wands, they have these electrodes on them that
Mm-hmm.
all have different shapes. And so I was asking him which shape does what, because in building for people, and then also building, like actually working on bodies, like the shape determines function.
Mm-hmm.
The shape determines the actual input output of of the electromagnetic and etheric medium that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the body, like if we were to think of like our body as being a container for all these, like I guess you would say array, or all these little antenna, the shape of our body creates a very specific array of the water molecules in us.
Hmm.
That array allows access to certain things.
Hmm.
So what makes us very unique is that all of our shapes are completely different.
Interesting.
When we were born, where we were born, how we were born, how we were raised, we all have a very specific antenna array for all the structured water that is within us. And so a lot of the time people lose their memory. I think it's a combination of the fact that they actually have really crap water in their body, and or their antenna array, i.e. their body, is reconfigured itself in a certain way where that no longer matches
Mm-hmm.
the life stream.
Interesting.
And so you no longer can connect to, because we're all living in the cloud, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like our memory is in the cloud. Our memory isn't in our gray matter. The gray matter contains the genetic memory, but the memory of the life stream, the memory of the sentience, is actually in the cloud. The clouds are comprised of what? Water, highly rarefied proteolytic water. And so you have this component within us, is as we grow, our array is changing.
Mm-hmm.
We hit the stasis point where we're no longer growing, our shape stays somewhat the same, and then our shape is always changing, so our array is always changing, and this is always giving us different access points when needed, depending on our location within the greater plane of existence. It's an amazing thing. Like there is never like what is it, I wanted to say it's a Hindu saying, but I don't think it is. I think it was a Taoist saying, where you can never step in the same water twice. Like you can never step in the same river twice, because the water's always moving.
Right.
Like literally our body is constantly changing and moving its shape and all this stuff. And even the way we move it, and like our capacitance and all this is constantly moving. And this constantly reorganizes the array of water within our body that allows us to access all the different information that's available.
That's awesome, man. That's so, and for me, through my experience, my journey, that makes complete sense. I can understand someone who hasn't heard anything we're talking about, hasn't looked into it at all. I can see how this is hard to comprehend. But when, and maybe this isn't fully it, but I always try to bring it back to someone who isn't at the headspace and in the ability to open their minds to these thought processes. I always try to bring things back to what makes sense to the average individual, the person who doesn't think like this, right? So what would be like something that you can try to like equate it to, um, in regards, because like as I said, most people are like, wait, water, memory, what? Like I can see how, so I always try to bring it back to certain things that people, as I said, wouldn't have. Like what could be something that you can kind of like an analogy of something that, or like
Well,
life
a,
experience that
a,
people.
a really easy way of like the analogy I was already trying to make was essentially an antenna,
Mhm.
so for those of us that still remember an analog age.
Yep. All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Awesome, man. I think so. Let me hope that that went through okay. Anyway, we got paused there for a second. So we were getting into some good stuff with antennas. So you were equating it to an antenna.
Yeah. So the best way in the analog world is like an antenna, depending on where it is actually pointing, will actually let you receive a signal, you know?
Right.
And when you have
Oh, hello again.
and when you have an array, an array is just a group of antennas that are shaped a certain way. And when you have an array, they find that like, the mass of the array can receive or transmit so much more than just, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole tech thing. And
Right.
so
Yeah. No worries, man. Um,
and so with that, it's just when I say our body is an array, it's an analog analogy
so
where
true.
you just have all the water. They're like these little antenna and they're shaped. The array is the actual shape of your body.
Mhm.
So your body is the array, which means your body becomes like the receiver transmitter in existence. And
Mhm.
so like I was talking to Mackenzie about like why is a bad haircut so terrible?
Mhm.
Like have you ever had just like a haircut that
Yep.
like you get the haircut and like you just don't feel right?
Yep. Yep.
You're just like what's going on? And like it doesn't really matter, like you look basically the same,
Yeah.
but you just feel like crap.
Right.
Your array is off.
Totally, man.
The frequency that your body is wanting to generate and receive is impossible with that shape that you're
Yeah.
in. And that's why I love watching women, especially because women seem to be more phasic than men are, is that they're like, oh, I need my hair to be this way. I need to be wearing this. I need to like, they're always changing because they're literally tied to the moon,
Mhm.
and that moon, depending on where that moon is in the zodiacal, plane ecliptic, there are different energies that are moving through, and depending on that woman being the negative pole, meaning the receiver, she's going to feel like, oh, I need to I need this bag, or I need to, my hair needs to look dyed, or whatever it
Right.
is. Men as the positive pole, we're not the receptor, we're the projector. So like we still go through those phases because we have that somewhat within us, but it's not as ingrained in our very fiber of our being to do that. And
Interesting.
so it's really neat to watch because we are just an antenna array. And then when you're in relationship, like whoever you're around physically, you guys start to resonate. And
Mhm.
if you're dissonant, oh my goodness, doesn't that suck?
Yeah. Let's say you definitely
Like
feel it.
it's like two transmitters trying to send their signal, and it's just creating nothing but a noise. There's no
Totally.
signal, all noise, right? and and so this is why I think the whole thing of touching and sexuality is what that does, is that actually gets you both resonating in the same circuit, where now you're in this circuit and it's like,
Mhm.
okay, the
Yeah.
signal strength is much higher than the noise is.
Exactly. And I would even say, compile that with knowing how to affect your own vibration, your own frequency with someone. So say you have, two people aren't, they're not jiving, you feel that distance, right? And it's knowing, like, depending on whatever's causing that, a lot of times it's driven by a lot of our insecurities, our traumas, our things that basically we don't particularly like about ourselves, or things that are putting us in a state of fear, anxiety, stress all the time. And what you realize, at least I've come to realize, is when you're trying to meet someone with that same energy, even though it might be from a different perspective, but it's the same energetic response, or energetic, as vibration. What is just that is now you don't even, a lot of times people don't want to create that physical contact. They want to keep the space for protection. And it's knowing how to overcome that. If looking at it like, if in a relationship, is knowing, like, instead of meeting them with that same tension, it is coming in with truly what the heart space is love, not the pedophilic love, but like true love, and coming in with this, understanding, or willing to listen, but also, again, being, true who you are, logic, reasoning, etc. Because then when you do have that, it kind of breaks that barrier of that frequency with people, right? Like, you try to meet somebody with a debate, for example, and they're not ready to hear a debate. Like, you can be right, but that's not going to change the outcome. We've all experienced that in our modern life here. You know what I'm talking about. Doesn't matter how much you try to give that logic and reasoning, that's not what that person needs. And that can also be coming from our own anxiety, insecurity, right? And that's just the truth.
More often than not, it is.
Yeah.
I've had the chance of coming across a few creditors in my life, and one thing I noticed about a creditor, like in the law, like, you're either a creditor or a debtor.
Mm-hmm.
And debtors are very quick to give you all the information.
Yeah. Yeah.
A creditor doesn't say shit.
Yeah.
They answer your question with a question.
Yeah.
Then another question, and they'll answer you with another question. They literally are just there gauging where you're at and letting you go through your own private experience. Like, people understand when they're always sharing their shit out there, they're making it a public affair.
Mm-hmm.
That's not being a creditor. A creditor is literally like, if you are a creditor, that's like the highest spiritual calling, because you're engaging a being in pulling their potential to the surface without telling them anything.
Yeah.
You can't tell anybody anything.
Yeah.
You really can't. Like, you've said it, as a personal trainer,
Yeah.
you could show them all the evidence in the world. You could tell them your own experience. They might find you entertaining. They might even trust you.
Mm-hmm.
You still cannot tell anybody anything.
It's true.
A creditor knows that, and so they don't even try. They're just waiting for you, and wherever you're at, that's where they meet you.
Well, it's for those, in a simple comparison, it's like when you go and watch those movies where it's like the sensei, on the closest, you get like a sensei, and the person's like, all right, sensei, like, what do I need to do? And it's like, clean the toilet. It's like, well, okay, fine, all right, clean the toilet. It's like, now go do this. Like, simple things, like, where it's like, what's the point of this? It's like, what do you think the point is? Go do that now. You know what I mean? It's so like that, just like you're guiding them through their own journey. Like, I know what you're trying to get me to do. It's like, clean the shitty poo. Yeah, exactly. Like, but it's more than that, obviously, but it is that experience of knowing. And for myself, going more, I'm just trying to wake people up. I'm trying to get things across. Little does that do. And if it does the exact opposite of what I want, that my intention, but it's also looking inward, going like, well, what's driving this? Is this insecurity? Is this, a need to be right? Is this a need to be liked? Is this a need to be wanted? Whatever those things are, and just going, oh, okay. I don't want, that's not, I've worked on it. That's not what matters anymore. It's now going like, for me, or at least from my own experience, of like bringing up stuff about the Bible and being like, this is what I find interesting. And if people are interested, great. It's like, cool. It's not about like, do you not see this? It's like, hey, does anyone else see like this about the body, or hey, isn't it interesting that this is this, and then just kind of leave it there, be like, oh, that, you know what I mean? For me, that's where I've seen a lot of people willing to hear what I'm saying more. Not that that's the point. If they listen, great. If they don't, at this point, I don't really care. I just enjoy things, you know, but it's not, as you said, it's not being a debtor. It's not going into these bringing it back to relationships of like, I need to be the right one here. I need to be this. I need to be that. It's like, hey, you're working with energies here. You're working in tandem or in the symbiosis with somebody. Now, if that's what you want, then go do it. Know how to do it. Learn from that. You know, it's this energetic dance that's occurring. Know how to move with this waltz here. You know, now you're going into a salsa. Like, it's knowing how to energetically respond to that and go, okay, let's do this. You know.
Mhm.
So
Exactly.
yeah, man. But dude, I know you got your daughter. I know we've been going on for a while, and I appreciate your time, man. And this is such a fun conversation. I love going into all these things, man. But
My pleasure, brother.
dude, well, thank you so much. And are you gonna give out in social media and plugs or anything? Or
I'm still on Instagram as Bio Charisma. You know, it's just biocharisma.
awesome, man.
BIOCHARISMA. And I keep saying I'm going to make a website, but I keep floundering at that.
Well, I was gonna say, dude, I mean,
But yeah, just Bio Charisma on Instagram. I don't have any Facebook presence. I don't do Facebook. I like Beartaria, like on Beartaria app. I'm Tophur, Tophur. I think that's really it. You know, and I've just been doing other people's podcasts, and usually it's just my name, Christopher Gardner.
awesome, man. Well, I was gonna say, as you said, you've been making waves with people. You've been bringing up a lot of really interesting and thoughtful conversations and ideas and concepts. And someone who does listen to these conversations, you're bringing so many things into people's fields now where they're having to either go like, man, I want to know more. This is interesting, and people being like, don't want to hear it. This means I have to do self work.
Yeah.
But I appreciate all the work you have been doing. I'm happy that you and your family are where you are, and you guys are just crushing as always. And it's great to see your beautiful daughter just happy as can be. And you guys are in a great environment. So I appreciate it again, man. And with that, everyone who listens, go check him out. It's worth your time. It's worth your energy. And I would be lying if I say that some of the things he brings up is not intense. However, when you take a second, you just break it down, and you get to the most simple form, it actually all makes perfect sense. But on that, I thank you all for listening. Tophur, we'll see you again next time, man. Have a good one, everyone.